Previously on the Sugar Baby Confessionals.
I quit my job, left my wife, because that seemed like a bit of an adventure. I am a fly in the ointment, and if it wasn't me, it may well have been somebody else. I'm very uncomfortable about the whole money side of it. If it's a case of Ruby having to make a choice, then she should choose him and her children. We don't have any rules. If either of us felt it necessary to ask questions like that, the best thing would be to go home. I can't see a particularly happy ending.
So in the last episode, I interviewed the Brit. And to be honest, I'm feeling a little bad about it. Like maybe I was too harsh on him. I mean, he never signed up to be the villain in the story, and he's not. He's really not. It was actually gracious and brave of him to speak to me. Some punk who he's never met about his private affairs. It's messy, this stuff, isn't it? That's the thing about real life, though. Often there are no villains. As a storyteller, this is both inconvenient and, at times, hard for me to grasp. Every story cries out for a villain, right? They are, after all, the best characters. But that's not reality, and I'm not in control of this story. Sure, I'm cutting it together, I'm putting music in the places I think it would heighten your emotional response. But at the end of the day, I can only follow Ruby down her own private rabbit hole. It would be a lot neater if everyone conformed to their stereotype. But just as I would hate to be reduced to, I don't know, a liberal snowflake, it's not fair to paint the Brit as just a sugar daddy. So thank you for your honesty, the Brit. This week, we're going to hear Madelaine and Ruby updating us on their sugar baby shenanigans, as well as where they stand in terms of being sugar babies after almost 7 months. How do they feel about it all now? What have they learnt about themselves? About love? All this and more on this week's episode, Petty 3, Where We Are Now.
I think it's fair to say that there's been a lot of really surprising and interesting developments.
I would agree with that. Sometimes change can be scary and painful in the moment, but I'm a firm believer in embracing what life throws at you, so I would say it's all good. What about you, Madelaine?
Well, I agree with that.
So let's get started with you then first, Madelaine. When I last spoke to you, you had become a bit disillusioned with the whole sugar baby process. Where do you stand right now?
I guess Ruby and I had a conversation about modifying the profile a bit to take away some of the sense that I was a single and available woman, and giving it the idea that I was taken and stable, and this was just something extra that I was doing, and it was sort of an experiment to see what would change about the candidate. So that is something that I'm just curious to see how that will change. So I made those edits last night and they were uploaded this morning. But of course, as soon as you show up on the site, you start getting emails from men. And I spoke with a gentleman last night who at first they're always okay at first. And then when I started sort of pushing back to some of the things that he wanted me to travel a great distance to meet him the first time, just in case we hit it off and he wanted to have sex right away. That's not really okay with me. I really feel like it's a negotiation and you should meet me halfway.
Yeah.
Ruby and I share a policy about a lady doesn't make the first offer. And he was sort of trying to bully me into giving him a number. Well, I don't want to meet you unless I know what your ballpark is. Well, put your ballpark out there and I'll let you know if I'm in it. Yeah. Things like that. And I was like, you know what? This is still exhausting. It's just as exhausting as I recall.
I was just imagining you getting lost in these, baseball metaphors, No, wait, if I pitch to you, then you might hit a home run.
Not only is it more complex than traditional dating, by the time I get to the date, I'm already annoyed with you. Yeah. So it still feels not a whole lot worth it, but I will be interested to see how the candidacy changes based on those edits that I made, or if it does at all.
What are the downsides of this process, do you think, being a sugar baby?
I think that there's a real sense from some of these men that because they have the money, they have the power in the situation. And I don't think that that's the case. But when you get the ones that really, really believe that, they can become belligerent, they can become really obnoxious, and that's just not something that I'm willing to deal with. And then sometimes it's very frustrating to sort of weed through. And I don't think Ruby has had the same experience because I live in a very different place. It's very frustrating to weed through these people in terms of who's actually really a wealthy sort of man who's capable of doing this and who's pretending, who's having that fantasy for himself and at the last possible second is going to say, oh, by the way, I need to cancel this date and never show up for one.
Yeah, it's a lot of time wasters out there.
Yeah, and that's just not something that I need to put up with. That is something that has me sort of not interested in it at all. But because we had discussed this little like experimental idea, I was interested to see if that would change the landscape at all.
Right. So maybe if we touch base again in like a year or something, it would be interesting to hear if that had made a difference. You want someone to engage with you, and I guess it's a sort of not a pretense, but a thing that you both have to wear quite lightly, this idea of being a gentleman about it, and the whole power dynamic, and who has the power and who doesn't.
You have to recognize that the power structure is really much more equal than anyone gives it credit for.
At this point, Ruby's connection cut out, something to do with her kids and the imminent demise of a particularly valuable knick-knack. And when she rejoined us, she sounded like someone haunting the bottom of a well.
She'll probably join us at some point, I guess.
Can I call her?
It keeps telling me that she's... Are you here? It's weird. I know. I can hear you. You sound like a ghost.
Oh my god! That is so weird.
Is this the ghost of Ruby's past? I'm sorry, but it's so funny. It's so bad. I don't know what advice to give. Like, maybe just trying to call us back or something?
Guys?
Yeah, okay.
Oh.
Yes, thank God.
It's me.
If this was a movie, she'd be like the ghost of some poor sugar baby who died in the course of duty and who's coming back to warn us from the future or something. Mend your ways, Madelaine. Oh, face the Reaper.
Speak to us, spirit.
I think I hear both of you.
Thank
Glory,
goodness.
glory, bloody
It's
hallelujah.
a Christmas miracle. All right, so where should we pick up then?
Okay, so we're picking up on basically Madelaine is giving us the lowdown on what are the pitfalls of being a sugar baby and the fact that ultimately the pros don't really outweigh the cons.
Sorry, the thing that I wanted to comment on was that Madelaine said, you know, she and I do live in two very, very different places and two very different markets, if I could use that word.
Yeah.
So this may have something to do with the fact that my profile is very different from hers, or at least it was before she did a few tweaks and updated it a bit. You know, I do list that I'm married, I do list that I have kids, but the people who have contacted me, by and large, have not been time wasters. I haven't had sexual experiences with very many sugar daddies, but I have met a good few for that initial meet and greet to see if there's any kind of chemistry. And for every single one of them, with the exception of one guy, they all came back with offers. So yeah, I mean, I don't know if that's because the area that I live in, there are way fewer people into this kind of lifestyle. So maybe the ones here who know about it are just more serious. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a much huger place where Madelaine lives. I mean, there's just thousands and thousands more people.
Exactly.
So obviously she's got to try and separate the scurf from the people who actually mean to do it the right way.
The thing that you were about to comment on before the sound went all funky, though, was that the power structure is really much more 50-50 than people give it credit for.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that. I can't recall a moment of meeting a sugar daddy in which I felt as if he had the upper hand and, you know, I was just accepting what I was given. I haven't felt like that at all, whether it's just correspondence through email, whether I meet him for a coffee, whether we went forward and had some kind of relationship. It does feel very equal. Madelaine, don't you think that has a lot to do with the manner in which we value ourselves?
in your experience, you probably get that from men immediately. I feel that here, you have to set a tone for that. And yes, it does have to do with the way that you value yourself. And what I think happens here is that that's unexpected. So
really? That surprises me a little bit because I have to tell you, the greater culture in which I live is much more conservative and patriarchal than where you are. Big time.
So odd,
So
isn't it?
that's really interesting to hear. I mean, what do you think, Esty? You've visited both places, so
Yeah, I mean, it is very, very interesting to have you guys sort of flipping it that way, because I totally agree. But it might simply because where you are, the people who are choosing to have the kind of lifestyle that you're talking about are in a specific demographic of people. The kind of people that you've probably set your sights on will be travelers, they'll be more sophisticated, perhaps they'll be more, whereas Madelaine is dealing with exponentially more people.
Just listening to her talk about it is exhausting.
You also have to consider that, many of the women who do this are younger, college student, don't really know what they want or who they are yet. Think about who you were when you were 19, 20, 21.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I was a raging idiot.
I was a dummy. Yeah.
So as opposed to who you are now, and it may be that in this particular sphere, it's not always expected for a woman to demand the kind of respect that women like us demand. So it may sort of come out of the blue.
But that's almost just as bad, because it sort of implies that younger women expect to be treated how the other person chooses to treat them, rather than having an innate sense of this is how I should be treated.
Not necessarily expect to be, but are more likely to just sort of go along.
Yeah,
to put up with it.
They're not really sure, or they haven't determined who they're going to be yet, so they just sort of make decisions based on what's going on until they develop an experience, and then make decisions later based on that wisdom and experience.
Yeah. I think it's also because perhaps these men feel that there's less stigma for a man paying for sex than there is for the woman who's being paid for the sex. So I guess there are some men that will still think that they have more power simply because they're purchasing, they're
Oh, absolutely.
As we talked about.
Absolutely agree with that. That the same man who will purchase sex will turn around 5 minutes later and call the woman he purchased it from a whore.
But the thing about being a sugar baby is that it isn't just the sex. At least it isn't in my mind, and it hasn't been that in my experience either. I feel like the men who've contacted me through that site really genuinely seems like they wanted a connection with someone, as opposed to, they could pay good money to hire an escort or a straight up prostitute, someone who's going to service them physically, but very clearly not interact with them in any kind of a mental or emotional level.
But I think this is what I was talking about before. And from talking to the Brit, which I had a conversation with before, Madelaine, he was definitely looking for connection. He wasn't just looking for sex and stuff. And I think that does show you where Ruby is living is a totally different place. Let's say it's a third world country, partly with the first world-ish infrastructure. Let's put it that way. And therefore, the amount of people that she is going to, put in all her sort of specifications, there's going to be fewer people that crop up. Of those people, they're looking for something perhaps they can't find in that society in any other way.
I do totally understand. Absolutely. And I think that you're right about that. Maybe it just comes down to a numbers game.
Yeah.
The metropolis that Madelaine is wading through, it's just so vast.
Yeah.
And this kind of arrangement is so much more popular there than it is here.
Yeah.
I have to say, most of the people that I met through the website were international and not local from this country. It's probably because those people could afford me. If you have money that isn't the currency that is of this country, but a stronger currency, then your buck, whatever that buck happens to be, goes a lot further. So
you get more bang for your buck? Sorry. I had to.
You went there.
I had to do it. I think actually there's a very interesting conversation which I was trying to start, something about first world versus third world dynamics and how that might play into it.
We're touching on a very complex, global, socio-economic issue here, and I kept trying to draw a larger point from it, but it's tricky when we can't mention the specific countries our two sugar babies live in. Plus, although Ruby is in a third world country, she's still privileged. She isn't desperately poor and seeking this sort of lifestyle for survival reasons. So her experience will necessarily be very different from someone who is. We're going to touch on these issues more deeply in part 1 of the feminism episode, so if you're interested, look out for that.
I think it's a very odd thing that the person living in the third world country is the one who finds that she's treated more as an equal than the one who is living in a first world, densely populated place that is kind of like a world power, supposedly right up to the minute with all kinds of human rights. And she's the one who's
that does surprise me.
Having to
I don't disbelieve it for a second because, if Madelaine says it, I know that it's true, but it is a little surprising to me.
I think that the issue that we have here comes from the way that men are taught, and when they rise to this kind of power, the ones that are actually really wealthy, when they have that kind of wealth, depending on the way that they've made it, they are basically handed whatever they want here and now. And it's not necessarily just a gender-based structure. It's them versus everyone that they view as somewhat beneath them.
Yeah,
so
that's a very interesting point. So it's not simply the male-female thing. Like if you are someone who they are paying to do something for them, whether you be a man, woman, waiter, horse groomer, I don't know, you just automatically go down a level, down a couple of rungs on the social strata, and therefore they feel that you should just sort of kowtow to them.
Right. And even if they say, they want a connection in addition to any sort of physical relationship, just because they're somehow purchasing it, they think that they can have that right now in the way that they lay it out and the way that they demand it. And that's still not an equal power structure. And I'm just not inclined to deal with that.
Right.
Well, why would you? I mean, I totally agree, Life is too short to put up with that kind of bullshit.
I would have thought that these websites would be structured like lists and lists of specifications. You could tick loads and loads and loads and loads of boxes, and by the end of having ticked millions of boxes, you would have just really refined it so that you only get, the exact type of person that you want to get.
No, you know what? There are dating sites that are like that, like real psychological tests that are supposed to analyze you and all the rest. But the site that Madelaine and I have used is really not like that at all. I mean, it's basically just basic profile almost, a couple pictures.
Yeah, and there is an opportunity for the man, or on the opposite end, the sugar mama, if you're so inclined, to verify their level of wealth, but no one does that. Apparently, the structure is financially invasive, and they're not going to do it.
Right.
Yeah. I've never seen anybody do that either. I'm glad that you mentioned the sugar mama. I only had one exchange with a sugar mama on the website, and she was on the other side of the world, so that wasn't really going to happen. But there really aren't many of them out there.
No, there aren't.
Which is so unfortunate. I would freaking love a sugar mama. I think that would be so much fun.
I asked Ruby about Justine, the woman she mentioned in episode 9, during our interview with the Brit. There was some convoluted story about a threesome, which BT dubs I still don't really understand. This woman cropped up as having arranged the adventure, so I wondered if Justine may have been a sugar mummy.
Oh no, she wasn't a sugar mama.
Right.
I mean, very, very, very far from it. No. She's just a young woman that I know.
Oh, I thought the story was going to continue. We met on a dark night on the docks, and there's a bunch of sailors coming towards us, and I don't know.
She's not even a sugar baby. She's just someone that I met through Favorite Person, actually. He met her online, and they corresponded for quite a while. I think they met up once, although they didn't wind up dating each other because at the time, she, I guess, had an attack of conscience, so she didn't want to go through with anything at the time. And I remember Favorite Person being kind of bummed out about it because she's a really cool chick and he liked her. And months and months and months went by. And, both of us thought, well, okay, that's it. He moved on and found a different girlfriend. And then she sent both of us an email saying, hey, I'm so sorry I flaked out on you guys. I'm back in the swing of things. If you can forgive me, I'd love to meet up with you. And favorite person and I were like, what? Okay. But, I think it took real chutzpah for her to send a message at all, and certainly one that apologized so pleasantly.
Right.
And stuff like that, I don't take that personally. The fact that she and I had plans to meet each other, and then she just disappeared.
Right.
So she never sent a message canceling or saying, hey, I need to take a break or whatever. She just never got back to us. And that's fine. Who knows what's going on in people's lives? I'm never going to take that kind of thing personally.
Yeah.
So I'm very relaxed. I was like, yeah, no problem. Just, if you could do me a favor and next time you decide to take a break, just let us know. It's really not a big deal. Yeah, so that's how I know her.
So she was corresponding with the idea of being with both of you at the same time.
Well, it started out for just her and favorite person to have a relationship. But he's kind of, I think like most men, somewhat obsessed with the idea of a threesome.
Yeah.
So he's the one who brought it up with her that his wife is bisexual and if you ever want to explore that, just let me know. And she was really interested. So I started chatting with her as well, separately from favorite person. And we finally made plans to meet up and have a day out wine tasting together.
All three of you, or just the two of you?
Just the two of us.
Right.
And then she just disappeared. So
had she ever had a bisexual experience before, or?
I think that she had kissed a girl when she was in college, like a drunken night, but didn't have full-on sex, just kissed her. So beyond that, no, she'd never been with a woman before.
Right, okay. So she might have just gotten cold feet at the last second.
Yeah. Okay. Well, and the thing is, she is not honest with her husband. He has no idea about her extramarital shenanigans.
Oh, I see.
So I'm sure there must be a lot of kind of anxiety within her, pressure, worry. Is he going to find out? And I don't know. I think that eventually that must get to a person. I mean, you must need a break from that after a while.
I tried to wrestle the conversation back to recapping their sugar baby experiences. As you'll know from listening to the last couple of episodes, Ruby's whole perspective on sugar dating appears to have evolved into something very different from when she began this journey. I remind her of her thoughts at the beginning, that it would be a fun diversion, a way to spice up her and FP's sex life.
Yeah, for the longest time I've had the sexual fantasy of being a high-class call girl or, being a kept woman, Western geisha, something like that. It sounds kind of ridiculous, but it's just a sexual fantasy. So I don't think that we should ever moralize or judge ourselves too harshly on what gets us off,
Yeah.
So it was actually favorite person who sent me the link to the website and said, hey, I just read an article about this site and maybe you should check it out.
This is interesting. I never knew it was actually FP who instigated the whole sugar baby thing. Over the course of this podcast being aired, where we have had criticism, it's often fallen more harshly on Ruby. She's the one, these people imply, who's putting her marriage at risk by recklessly indulging in prostitution. Despite the fact that Ruby's made it clear more than once that FP gets to have his own girlfriends on the side, the fact that she's being paid for sex has always been the straw breaking the camel's back for her critics. But this fact clearly indicates that from day one, he has been just as invested in Ruby's sugar dating. I wonder if this will change people's perspectives. Would it somehow make it better if they're both fully on board? The only difference between them is she's getting paid for her assignations. Is the money that changes hands really the problem? I'm not sure.
That's why I decided to go for it. It just seemed like the right time.
And tell me how your perspective has changed on the whole sugar baby thing, as well as yourself personally. How have you changed?
Well, I feel like I've changed tremendously in very surprising ways. I don't think that being a sugar baby is necessarily a good or a bad thing. I think it depends on the person who wants to be a sugar baby. If she's willing to put in the time to find the right kind of sugar daddy or daddies for her, then that's great. And much like Madelaine was saying, it is a lot of hard work. So you definitely need to be willing to do the hard yards if you want to get something really good out of it. For the right kind of person, I think that would really work well. That's not me, though. I didn't get into being a sugar baby for the money because I needed the money. It was really, as I was saying before, to realize a sexual fantasy that I was very curious about. And that itch has definitely been scratched. I feel like I've had enough experiences with various sugar daddies, the corresponding with them, the meeting with a bunch of different people, being sexual with a couple of them. It's fulfilled the fantasy, and I no longer have that itch, I suppose is the best way to put it. It doesn't tickle my pickle anymore. So I have turned off my profile. I haven't deleted it. I wasn't really sure how to do that, actually, but I just, blacked it out basically so that nobody new could contact me.
Right.
And I'm not planning to be a sugar baby anymore or find a new sugar daddy or anything like that. I think that phase, I've gone through the paces. I've had my fun. And it's cool. I'm in a good place with it now.
You didn't find that the money, for example, made such a difference to your life that it made it worthwhile in and of itself?
No, it didn't. I was a little bit surprised. I thought that I would get off on the money a little bit. In my mind, in my fantasy, that was something that made me feel powerful in the sexual fantasy. Someone paying me for something that favorite person gets for free, in a sense.
Yeah.
And the first couple times it felt the first couple times with a different sugar daddy, it felt quite cool. With the Brit, it's always felt somewhat awkward because I really, really liked him from the very beginning. So from the first time that he and I had a date and he gave me an envelope of money, I actually had this split second where I wanted to hand it back to him and go, actually, you don't need to give it. Like, I really like you. You don't need to give me this. I didn't do that because that wasn't our deal, and I wasn't so sure favorite person would be happy about that.
That's one of the things that makes him a tiny bit more secure about your relationship with the Brit, isn't it?
It seems to be. I haven't spoken to favorite person about my allowance in a long time. So I am still receiving an allowance from the Brit, and we have this somewhat awkward implied agreement that we just won't talk about it. He sends it every month, and I don't even say thank you anymore because I used to thank him, and then I noticed that he would never respond. And one day I asked him about it, and he said, well, I just prefer to kind of forget that I give it to you, and it's really not that much money to me. So I send the thing off, and then I just put it out of my mind.
Right.
So when you thank me, all you're doing is reminding me. And I was like, oh, okay. Guess I won't do that anymore.
But what did favorite person say? Because my impression was that was something that you actually loth to give up because he seemed to feel that's the thing that kept it at a bit of a distance, giving him a bit more room to come to terms with you.
It does make the Brit very different, doesn't it? Certainly if he, for whatever reason, decided to stop giving me an allowance, that would change our dynamic in a huge way. And that, at the moment, that's not something that I'm willing to ask for.
For both of you, actually, you and favorite person, it's giving you both breathing room to assess what it actually means. What does the Brit mean to you? How is he going to play into your relationship?
I don't know. I'm not sure if it actually has that much significance. I don't know. The biggest news on the horizon is that favorite person has unfortunately really been struggling with my relationship with the Brit.
Right.
And he has asked me for a little bit of space. That was his exact phrase. I need a little bit of space. And he wouldn't tell me exactly what that is. Maybe it's because he didn't know himself. I'm not sure. But, I pressed him and said, what is it that you need? And he couldn't really tell me. So I've offered to take a break from seeing the Brit, and I've spoken to the Brit, and he has agreed to this as well. In fact, he thought it was probably a good idea because he doesn't want to be in a position to cause harm or, be a destructive force in anybody's life. I know that the idea of that really bothers him.
Yeah.
So he's very supportive of favorite person and I just having some time to ourselves to essentially renegotiate the structure of our marriage.
Right. So
Yeah.
does he mean you guys are not sleeping in the same bed or something, or are you still physically intimate?
No, we're sleeping in the same bed. We are going out on our date nights. We are still talking about everything. No. What he meant was my relationship with the Brit. Like he needs some space from that. He needs me to not engage with the Brit for a little while. So I've agreed to do that.
Is that hard?
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like I have to do it because I want to show favorite person that I really do truly love him. And this isn't a case of anybody replacing him or, something crazy like that. But, I'm in love with the Brit. I really, really, really love him. I love spending time with him. I love getting to know him better. We have a wonderful relationship. And I don't want to have to miss him like that.
This must be so hard. It's one thing to engage in a sexual fantasy with your wife, but to have it take on a life of its own, to deepen and start to bleed into your real life, FP must feel like he's losing control of everything. But Ruby's fallen hard for the Brit now, and doesn't want to give up this dream made flesh. I can hear the reluctance in her voice.
How long has it been?
Well, it hasn't started yet. He's going away on a business trip at the end of this month. So when he leaves for that, we'll start a month's break.
But you're going to see him until the end of the month. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Is that creating a bit of difficulty with you and favorite person? Just because it kind of seems like it's quite a long time until he's going to get the space.
Well, that was kind of roughly not taking a break, but we had agreed to not make any drastic changes to the way life was functioning. We're going to go see a therapist. Right. We've decided to see a therapist to try and help us negotiate everything and just understand each other and come to some agreement that works for both of us. When we decided to go to the therapist, we also decided let's not make any huge drastic changes about the way life is structured. So for a while, that's kind of always been the deal, I suppose, that, we would renegotiate things once we started seeing her. And that seemed okay with favorite person for a while, and then, it was just getting harder and harder for him. So he said that he needed some space, and I said, what does that mean? And he said, I don't know what that means. You just have to give it to me. And so I was the one who thought, okay, do you want me to stop seeing the Brit for a little while? And he was like, yeah, I would really appreciate that. So that's in a nutshell.
I turned to Madelaine to ask her the same question. Has the money made enough difference to her life to make it worth all the hassle? For whatever reason, she seems to have had a much harder time of it than Ruby. In the beginning, she seemed really positive about the difference the money was making to her life. But now, it just seems to have caused her more trouble than it's worth.
It was fantastic for the, handful of months that it was there. But if I could quantify the amount of times, it's like 8 out of 10 where people are not actually as wealthy as they say that they are, and they end up being full of crap. And it's just like, if you on a per hour basis, it's just not worth it.
Was it actually that you were meeting someone who initially was kind of like making out they were wealthy, and then once it got down to brass tacks, they were sort of arguing you down to a point where you were like, it's not worth it for me?
Oh, not even arguing me down, just totally when it was time to like meet up or negotiate or whatever, they would totally and completely disappear. These people are living the fantasy up to this moment, and then it comes out that they have nothing.
Jeez, it seems like a lot of work, especially when you're not getting anything physical out of it.
Well, and there's photo fishing. Like, I got that figured out pretty quickly.
What is photo fishing for those of us who are?
When you send naked or boudoir photos of yourself to somebody, like I have private photos on the website, but they're basically what you could get of me on the beach. If people get all excited if you have private photos, and I'm pretty sure they're disappointed when they find out that they're not as private as you might think.
Yeah.
So then they push for more photos, and it's like I got to a point where I was I have a personal policy of no, you're not getting, those kind of private photos until we have an agreement.
Yeah.
Because, people want to put up that facade, pretend there's something they're not, and collect these photos of women.
So for the spank bank, they just want to have like loads of pictures. So they just solicit
I'm sorry.
you.
I don't think I've heard the phrase spank bank since I was in middle school.
No, but I mean, it literally is that, the hard drive, right? They just want to keep...
Yep.
So they'll just approach you purely to get some
Oh,
pictures
that's
of them.
another good one. Hard drive.
Hard
Oh,
drive.
God. I can't believe there's so many time wasters out there.
Well, it just goes to show you that anybody who feels that being in any part of the sex work industry, it is not easy money.
No.
Do you think if you sort of had the time and the inclination, you could find a satisfactory medium? Or do you think it's just not for you?
Maybe. It could certainly work. At this point, I just don't have the inclination or the time.
Is part of that because of your relationship with the Marquis? How's that going?
It's going okay. It's probably more because of my regular job, but it may have to do with the Marquis.
Have there been any developments on that score? You started asking the Marquis for some money?
No, I would never ask him that. The Marquis and his family suck with money, so I would never ask for that. I could see myself as a career sugar baby if I met somebody that I really liked. If there was somebody like the Brit, and my circumstances are obviously much different than Ruby's.
Yeah.
If I ran across somebody like the Brit, I could see myself, or 5 somebody's like the Brit, I guess. I could see myself being a career sugar baby, but that just hasn't been my experience. It's really just been
a parade of douchebags.
Yeah, kind of. I guess there are women who are career prostitutes by choice, like high-end escorts, and their sort of trade-off is that they deal with men one at a time on a short-term basis. And the idea behind being a sugar baby is that you deal with these men in a relationship sense in the long term. And if I think you're a jerk within the first half hour of talking to you, why on earth would I want to develop a relationship with you?
Yeah.
Mm.
There's also a difference in that the escorts, not always, but usually have some sort of go-between that I guess is doing the weeding out for them.
I actually don't get the sense that there's much weeding out. I mean,
right.
when you get pretty high up, you get to pick and choose, but I really get the sense that you choose money.
Yeah.
There's really something in Madelaine's voice, something so resigned and tired. Is she so beaten down from interacting with these men that she's completely lost any sense of the merits of what she previously thought this lifestyle had? It makes me wonder just how awful these interactions have been, or if they're not in themselves so terrible, if the accumulation of mild awfulness has just become overwhelming. Thing is, it's been widely reported that when women put themselves out there, even on regular dating apps, they can have their inboxes inundated with dodgy messages, dick pics, personal critique, and slut-shaming. I would imagine that making it known explicitly that you're a sugar baby can only make matters much worse in this regard.
So can you give us an update then on the sugar daddies that you did have contact with? So like Octocock and any of the others, Big Fish.
Octocock! Oh my god.
I hope that whatever he's doing is good stuff, but I just have no idea.
I have to admit I'm sort of sad about this. I got the sense that Madelaine really liked Dr. Cock. She didn't even charge him her normal rates because she actually wanted to spend time with him. She bought him gifts. The romantic in me wanted him to be the superhero his pseudonym suggests and sweep Madelaine off her feet and out of the clutches of the villainous Marquis. Sorry, I'm doing it again. Trying to force a narrative onto her life. The Marquis is not a villain and real life is not a fairy tale. The end. Or is it?
So you wouldn't have ever got in touch with him and just said, just person to person?
No, I mean, we were very friendly. He was really not that transactional.
What do you mean by transactional?
We hadn't really talked about I broke every rule and didn't negotiate anything with him. He just put money in my account. It just showed up there. There was nothing business-like about it. Like, we were very friendly before we even met. And he was the first person really that I spoke to off the site. And maybe he's tainted me for everybody else. Maybe that's part of the issue.
So what happened between them?
He ghosted, and I'm not the kind of person that chases. So because we were so friendly and because, we would exchange text messages every couple of days. What are you up to? How are the kids? Blah, blah, blah.
He has kids?
Because that was so much of our relationship.
So was he married then?
No, he's divorced.
All right.
But because that was so much of our relationship and our communication, it's not like it wasn't business between he and I. Like, we were kind of friends.
I can see your hesitation because in a normal circumstance, if you guys just met and you were having this correspondence and stuff, it would be perfectly natural for you to then text him and say, like, how you doing? I haven't heard from you in a while.
I'm just disinclined to do that.
Do you feel like you're being quite self-protective, or would you be like this anyway in a normal, ordinary dating situation?
I think it's self-preservation. It would be in, like, ordinary dating, too. This is sort of my MO. If you've disappeared from my life like this and I've reached out to you and you're not responding, I'm done.
So you had actually reached out to him?
Oh, yeah.
Right, okay. Did you ever get to give him those socks, the superhero socks?
I actually mailed them to his office and they got sent back. So I think the address I had might have been the old office.
That's a kind of a sad note to end it on, I have to say.
I know, that is really sad.
I wear them.
Well, now you're the superhero, but we knew that already.
But I wear the Doctor Who socks. I gave the superhero socks to somebody.
So tell me, what is your dating landscape like right now?
Bleak and sad and terrible.
Why do you say that, though?
Because it's bleak and sad and terrible.
Oh.
I'm disillusioned with men in general. The marquee is set an unfortunately high bar.
Firstly, it really boggles my mind that Madelaine sees the marquee as having set any kind of standard in terms of relationships. Unless she's talking about a very different kind of bar. But it's also interesting that Madelaine seems to be saying that she thinks she felt too much for the marquee and Dr. Cock. That this made it hard to go into these transactional relationships with other men. It reminds me of when Ruby said she felt the Brit was too nice to be a sugar daddy. That ideally, she didn't want to like them quite so much. This intersection between emotions and selling sex as a commodity is fascinating to me, as someone who can't picture ever divorcing sensibility from sex. To these women, the emotions make selling sex more difficult, which seems at odds with a purely business-orientated approach. The approach they've previously been trying to maintain. Has it just become too hard to keep their emotions separate?
I haven't met anybody that I think is particularly interesting or I feel like is going to fill it or hit it. And then I have the problem that I'm totally in love with him. So, that's an issue.
I think that is the block in your life, in your love life.
Gotta be
it's the marquee because it's like a circular process. You can't move on until someone dislodges him from the position he has in your heart. And he's around you every day. Everything you do kind of reminds you of him. You can't get away. I can totally understand you feeling a bit trapped in the situation when there's no one else on the horizon to, switch him out with. And yet, there are these downfalls. You can't have that complete connection. Based on previous conversations, you can't 100% trust him. There's that seed of doubt.
Well, you know what? We've actually worked through a lot of that trust crap. Like,
the trust crap.
Well, it's stupid shit. I hate to say trust issues. It sounds so cliche.
Yeah.
We've worked on so much of that because I'm not your wife. He loves to tell me that he's not like any other man I've ever met. Well, you know what? Guess what? I'm not like every other woman you've ever met. So don't try to put me in that same box. Don't keep from me the things you would keep from them. And, in some ways he's been able to adhere to it, and some things we still work on, but at least now I know what I'm working with and what to expect.
In other words, she's settling for whatever scraps the Marquis deigns to offer her. Oh, Madelaine.
But the bottom line is that what I know about him is he's not leaving his wife. And I respect that. I do. That's the truth. And if she left him, that would suck ass, because that would still make me second. And that would still suck.
I have to admit to being a little disappointed that in all the time that's passed since we last spoke, Madelaine's relationship with the Marquis doesn't appear to have changed one jot. She's still just as hung up on him as she ever was. I don't know what I was expecting. Actually, yes I do. I wanted her to have found love with someone more healthy for her, to have kicked the Marquis to the curb, along with her job as his glorified dog's body and doggy style buddy. I wanted her to be on to pastures new, possibly wearing brand new superhero socks and humming Defying Gravity from Wicked.
What do you mean it would make you second?
Like, it wouldn't have been his choice. It wouldn't have been that he chose me. It would be me by default.
Right.
And that would still be kind of awful. So it sort of sucks. But I also know that he's having an extraordinarily difficult time dealing with how he feels about me, because I do know that he loves me, and I know that that's very confusing for him. He doesn't know how to deal with it. He does not intend to leave his wife.
But hang on, though, you make it so easy for him. Why is he having any difficulty? Because as far as I can see, he's having his cake and he's eating it. And he's eating lots of other cake as well.
Well,
he's having the whole cake shop.
He's actually not eating any other cake, which I do tend to be surprised about sometimes, but I don't know when he would eat it, so,
But my impression was you've made it abundantly clear to him that he can tell you if he wants to go and have sex with someone else. You say that you're fine with that. You just want to know. It's the honesty that you want.
That's true.
And he still seems to have problems with that. There's a part of me that wonders if part of it for him is the dishonesty is a little bit of a thrill for him in a sense. And
that's a good point.
Opening the floodgates and saying, listen, there's no need for dishonesty. There's a small part of him that's like, well,
no.
I want there to be a little bit of room for me.
That woman that I mentioned before, Justine, she's very much like that. We had this fascinating conversation where she told me how much she gets off on having secrets. So not only does she lie to her husband about her extramarital affairs, she actually lies to the other men that she sleeps with about each other, which it just seems kind of crazy to me.
I think for some people, especially if it's like all about neural pathways as well, like you develop a neural pathway where...
I have no idea where I'm getting this neural pathway stuff from. Maybe I read an article or something before the interview. I don't know.
You have an urge to do something that is characterized as wrong, and you have those feelings of shame built into you. So every time you do the thing you're not supposed to do, you get that feeling of shame. And then you start to associate the feelings of shame with this pleasure that you're getting, by doing the thing that you're not supposed to do. Having the cake, basically. And so when you get to a situation, the person's actually saying to you, look, there's no need to hide it. You're not getting that extra little kick. So you're finding it, you're like, whoa, wait, where am I going to get the pleasure from? You know what I mean? Because you associate them together. You twin them in your mind.
The Marquis thing is not lying.
Yes. Yes, it is. We know from previous episodes that he lied about contacting lots of different people on Craigslist for sex. And it only came to light because he put Madelaine in charge of sorting out his phone. But it seems important to Madelaine to make the distinction that somehow, for her, being a liar is worse than him not loving her enough to leave his wife for her.
The Marquis thing is fucked up, dirty sex. Plain and simple.
But what I'm saying is you don't have a problem with that, right? You said that you're happy to facilitate that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
And-
where is his problem coming in?
What he struggles with is he's had relationships outside of his marriage before, and they were like, or not relationships. He's had sex outside of his marriage before, but never with anybody that he cared about. It's always been once or twice and then it was over and whatever. What he struggles with is that he does love me. And he has no intention of leaving his wife. He has no intention of leaving his family. We had the opportunity one night to like actually spend the night together, and he's laying in the bed with me and like halfway falls asleep and then like sort of sits bolt upright and he's like, I gotta go. I'm like, why? And we were in a hotel together and had two separate rooms, and he's like, I gotta go. This is too comfortable. I gotta go.
There is a sadness piling up. The days seem unwilling to stop. I can smell the scent of failure, such a tremor in my voice. You always had a choice. You always had a choice.
So he's going to the cake shop, he's eating the cake, and then he's forcing himself to vomit up the cake.
Kind of, yeah. That particular day, that's exactly what he did.
When I started in the beginning of the process to the end, I feel like my brain has been cracked open like an egg, and there's been quite a lot of scary realizations, but a lot of very interesting ones, as well, about people in general and how sexuality works and how much more complex and interesting people are, underneath the surface. And that's always a good thing. It's always a good thing to be exposed to that. You can empathize with people more. So thank you very much for that, everyone.
Thank you for inviting me to be a part of it.
Yeah, thank you. It's been such fun chatting with you.
I will see you both soon, hopefully.
Love you.
Bye.
Love you, Madelaine.
Love you too.
Bye.
It's so interesting to hear how Madelaine and Ruby's lives have changed because of their sugar baby experiences. Will Ruby's three-way relationship continue to flourish, or will the Brit's skepticism prove to be prescient? I really hope he'll be wrong, and she'll be the one to forge a truly wonderful polyamorous relationship. What about Madelaine? Will she finally lose patience with the Marquis? Rather than the stale crumbs and picked-off icing he's allowing her, will she find someone willing to split their love cake 50-50? Ugh, that metaphor is more mouldy than Miss Havisham's boudoir. Next week is an explosive episode with Ruby, touching base with her one last time before we skip ahead a year into her future. She and FP are struggling with Ruby's polyamorous arrangement with the Brit. Are the cracks starting to show? Find out for yourself by listening to the Sugar Baby Confessionals. This podcast was produced and edited by me, Sarah Mae Tucson, with help from Beth Keane, Mike Scott, and Geraldine Elliott. The music you've heard on this podcast comes from Danny Green's albums, Obituaries and Leish, as well as Kristen McClement's album, The Wild Grips. Find out about Leish by going to leishmusic.com. That's Laish music.com. And hear Kristen's work at kristenmcclement.com. I hope you've enjoyed what we've been doing. If so, do let us know. I really love hearing what you have to say, and it makes all the hard work that I've put into the podcast worthwhile. Also, if you have any questions for Ruby, email us on fablegazers@gmail.com. We've had some great feedback from you already, and thanks so much for the support. But remember, if you have specific questions, do let us know. If you send us a voice memo, we may even feature you on the show. Tweet us at @fable_gazers or take a peek at our lovely Instagram account. We're Fablegazers, one word. Rating, reviewing, and subscribing is very much appreciated and helps to keep us going. Names and details have been changed to protect the anonymity of those involved. This has been a Fablegazers production.